What's up YouTube, this is Harvey 1997 here, coming at you today with a deck profile for my version of ABCs for this format, that being the November 2017 format. So there's a couple stipulations to this in that I am designing this to be on a budget. However, there are some things that are a little out of budget for some players, but I'm going to mention some potential substitutes along with those when we get into them. So I'm purposely leaving out things like the Ash Blossom and things like that, strictly to make this much more affordable and easier for players to get access to. Because honestly, if you're playing ABC, it's probably because of budget options for that reason anyway. So yeah, I do think this is a very solid tier 1-ish deck. I don't think it's quite able to compete consistently with decks like Pendulum Magician and Spiral, but I still think it has a very good matchup against many other things along the way. So let's get right into the deck profile. Alright, so as always, we'll start with the main deck. We're running very standard 3 copies of A, 3 copies of B, and 3 copies of C. I've seen some people cut lower on C this format, but I don't really like that. I think you gotta open one of these things every game, so we're maxing them. Along with those, in that same logic, we're running 3 copies of Gold Gadget and 3 copies of Silver Gadget. I am not running any of Photon Thrasher anymore. I just found 3 and 3 of these to be significantly stronger. I just feel like they're a lot better for going into your plays like Ancient Fairy, so you can have an extra monster on the board whenever you do your combos. But yeah, I like these a lot better than Thrasher. Next, we have our Dragon Engine, being 1 copy of Destrudo, and 1 copy of Supreme King Dragon Dark Worm. Both have their purposes. Both are, they have their own unique niche in the deck, but mainly they're here for Dragon Ravine, and Foolish Burial, and another neat card, which we'll get to later. For those who don't know, most people know what Destrudo does. He says, summon a level 7 using him and one other monster. And he does go to the bottom of the deck when you use him for material. Do remember that. Then Dark Worm, the only relevant piece of text on this card is if it's in your graveyard and you control no monsters, you can special summon it from your graveyard. Hard once a turn, but then as long as you detach it, then it'll go to the grave instead of the extra deck, so you can potentially use it again later. Again, it helps get that extra level 4 body on the board. Next, we're running the 1 copy of GoFu just because it's still good. Still helps get like a Decode Talker out before you make your Dragon Buster, and that really is important. Then for our hand traps, we're running 3 copies of Ghost Ogre and Snow Rabbit. Again, I purposely put no Ash Blossoms in here for that reason, but yeah, I think Ghost Ogre is actually very underestimated right now. It's still very solid against Spiral, especially now that Double Helix is like the centerpiece to all of it. And with only, yes, Double Helix was a centerpiece before, but they used to have machine duplication to extend through. Now they don't. So without extra copies of Quick Fix as well, hitting just a Quick Fix with your Ghost Ogre can also just end the turn potentially. That's typically not a good idea, but in theory, But it also helps a lot against Pendulum Magicians, hitting either one of the graphs. And yeah, the only reason I'm running it, or the reason I'm running it and not any other ones, just because I don't feel like there's any other hand traps aside from Ash that are good against all the decks. For example, I originally had Max C in here, but I dropped it because it does not really help a lot against Pendulum Magicians. It's really good against Spiral, but that's not the only deck we have to be concerned with now. I'm assuming Spiral and Pen Magicians are the 2 main decks we're going to be facing, so that's why I left it at just 3 Ghost Ogres. No Droll for the same reason. It doesn't really do much against Pen Magicians, and DD Crow also does nothing against Pen Magicians. So just 3 Ghost Ogres for the hand traps. And now we'll move on to the spells. We're running a very large field spell engine, consisting of 3 copies of Union Hanger, 2 copies of Dragon Ravine, 1 copy of Oracle of Zephyra, 3 Terraforming, and 1 Set Rotation. So, obviously, the Oracle is for set rotation. This is just so we can have extra copies of both of our field spells. So, in theory, we have the field spells that we want to draw. We have 1, 2, 3 Union Hangers, and 3 Terraformings, and the 1-star rotation. So we essentially have 7 copies of Hanger if we need to get to it. Then we have our 2 Ravines, and the same thing. So we essentially have 6 copies of Ravine as well. And that grand total is 9 field spell cards out of the 40 card deck that we can draw into. And technically, if you include the Upstart that I have in here, 39 card deck, you're going to be getting one of these almost every single opening hand. That's very, very important. These get all of your plays started. You have to have field spell in order to make your Ancient Fairy Dragon live, and that's very important. You also need Union Hanger just for all of your plays. That's how the deck works. And then Oracle of Zephyra to block your opponent out of field spells, because that's still really good this format. The rest of the spells, running 1 copy of Dragon Shrine and 1 copy of Foolish Burial. Foolish is a little bit more generic in that you can potentially send an ABC part. Generally won't need to, though. And then Dragon Shrine, it's literally just Foolish Burial for either Destrudo or Darkworm. We don't have vanillas, so it's never going to be able to send 2. But I like it still, though. Still good. Then, we're playing the 1 copy of Upstart, like I mentioned. And I am running 1 copy of Raigeki. However, I do understand that some players cannot afford this or do not have it. I think if you're a budget player, it's a very, very solid investment. Pick up yourself a copy of Raigeki. You will not regret it. You can play this in just about anything. There's no reason not to. Yeah. But anyway, if you cannot afford one, however, Dark Hole, or put the Maxia in, or do whatever, I would suggest a card for going second, however. Probably Dark Hole is your best bet. Now, moving on to the traps. We're running a Solemn package with 3 warnings. I'm sorry, 1 warning and 3 strikes. And my tech choice for this format is 1 copy of Unending Nightmare. I was considering doing something like Cyclones or Twin Twisters, but I found just 1 copy of this to be really solid, because you don't need tons of back row disruption, because we have things like ABC Dragon Buster to deal with that. But Nightmare can just win games against a lot of decks. Like, against ABCs, you hit the field spells with this every time. Against Spirals, you hit Resort, you hit Big Red. Against Pendulum Magicians, you hit their Scales. And yes, this still does hurt Pendulum Magicians. Just don't be stupid and hit Purple Poison with it. And yeah, it can single-handedly win games, honestly. It's a blowout card. And I feel like it's just very solid, this format. Not running multiples, because if you draw multiples of it, it's horrible. But it's still really solid as a one-of from my testing. Now we'll move on to the extra deck. We're running 3 copies of ABC Dragon Buster. These are only fusion in the deck. Yeah, there's no reason to not run 3. 0 reason. Best card. Then, for our Link monsters, I'm running 2 copies of Proxy Dragon, Generic Link 2, incredibly important, both for plays with Gofu and for just sending 2 ABC parts. Also enables a lot of combos, so you can, like, send something, or send 2 monsters, then C goes to grave, so you can special the 3rd and make Decode Talker or something. It's really good. Speaking of, there's our 1 copy of Decode Talker. I thought about a second, but I think 1 is enough currently. I'm also running 1 copy of Borolo Dragon because I have it. However, if you do have it, I think this is the right way to go. If you don't, a 2nd copy of Decode Talker is just fine. Obviously, Borolo is better because it can take stuff and whatever, but Decode, he still allows for 2 open extra monster zones. He still gets the job done. So if you don't have a Borolo, I would suggest a 2nd copy of Decode Talker. That's it for our Link monsters. Moving on to the Xyzes, they're significantly smaller than what they have been in the past. 1 copy of number 41, 1 copy of Diamond Direwolf, 1 copy of Dweller. Then we have the Utopia package of Utopia and Lightning. Once again, I realize that not all players have access to Utopia the Lightning. If you do not, now again, I'm going to say for a budget player, this is a very, very solid investment because it's incredibly generic and you can use it in anything that can make rank 4s. But again, I understand not all players have that kind of money they can spend. So if you cannot, I would say just drop both. Do not play Utopia without lightning. I've seen some budget players do that. It's pointless, literally pointless. He's just a beater. The negate attack thing will never come up, believe me. So if you cannot afford lightning, just drop both of these. And I would suggest adding a second copy of number 41, because he's really just dirt cheap. And then the other one can be really whatever rank 4 you want. Maybe like a Castell or something like that. It's really up to you. But just another good rank 4 more than likely, so you can have a better toolbox. Maybe like a Tornado Dragon if you're really fearing back row. But that's also a little expensive too, but you know, your call. And lastly, we have our Synchro Monsters. Very small Synchro lineup, but we don't go into these a whole lot aside from our one copy of Ancient Fairy. The MVP of the deck. Just, it enables ridiculous combos with Destrudo. Just, it's so busted. But, yeah, one Ancient Fairy. One Black Rose, because board wipes are still cool. And one Samurai Destroyer. This thing is like an Armades when it swings. It also negates the effects of the monsters it battles. And on top of that, if it's destroyed while it's in your, while it's still under your control, so unfortunately, if your opponent takes it with their Boral load and then it gets destroyed, well, he's not going to get its effect. But I digress. If he's destroyed by an opponent's card effect, then you can target a machine in your graveyard and special summon it, including this big guy, which is really good. So yeah, that is going to do it for this video, guys. Really hope you enjoyed it. Again, I know that not everyone has access to all kinds of staple cards, things like that, which is why I tried to make this a little bit more budget friendly. I know having reprints of things like the Solemn Strike has also been a blessing for budget players. I know that not all of this is incredibly cheap, but I am still building it to be a meta-relevant deck. Some of these things, you just kind of have to invest yourself. If you want to get good wins, you have to get good cards. And if you recall, most of the things in this, if they had any kind of remote price tag to them, like the Unending Nightmare is like $4, the Strikes are like $5 or $6, Raigeki, well, that's a lot, but it can be swapped out for a Dark Hole. Things like that, they don't, and like the Ghost Ogres are like 10, but you should have a playset of Ghost Ogres from when they came out in the Mega 10s, honestly. But the thing is, nothing in here that is specific to this deck has a price tag. The only things that really have any kind of price tag to them are the very generic staples that really you should have in your collection, or in some kind of meta-relevant thing. If you don't, I highly suggest you pick them up. And once again, this is a very, very strong deck, this format. I highly suggest you try it out. Again, it's very good to make on a budget as well. As always, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe for all my future content, and I'll catch you in my next video.